Mother, it's our turn now. Welcome back to The Explainer. I am so glad you're joining me today because, wow, we have a truly fascinating and, honestly, deeply unsettling piece of dark folklore to unpack. It's called The Price of Eternal Bloom. And let me tell you, it is an absolute masterclass in suspense, atmospheric storytelling, and pure psychological horror. So grab a sit because we're going to dive right in and see exactly how a story about a seemingly picture-perfect family completely unravels into an absolute nightmare, entirely driven by hidden secrets and the corruption of innocence. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the plot, I really want you to keep one central question in the back of your mind. It's the backbone of everything we're about to look at. What is the true price of eternal youth, and who actually pays it? Because this explainer isn't just about recounting a scary campfire story. We're going to explore how vanity can be used as a literally devastating weapon. The narrative really challenges us to consider the hidden, almost invisible costs of pursuing perfection. You know, that dark dynamic where the person reaping all the benefits is never the one footing the ultimate bill. Section 1. The perfect facade. The illusion of perfection. Okay, so every good dark tale starts with a highly convincing picture of normalcy, right? To the outside world, our main character, Mariam, is just endlessly devoted to her two children, Ayan and Layla. But look at the sheer terrifying contrast here between perception and reality. The village sees a mother providing protective care for a delicate illness. They just think the poor kids need their rest. But the dark truth, it reveals children who are literally drained of life, walking around with hollow eyes, constantly wrapped up in thick scarf, even in the dead of summer heat. It's such a brilliant narrative trick because societal trust in this idea of the perfect mother ends up providing the ultimate cover for absolute horror. Of course, a facade like that can't hold up forever. Let's look at the macabre little clues the story strategically drops to build up that tension. It actually starts with an old neighbor, Mrs. Halima, just looking out her window at midnight. The text notes this faint humming echoing through the walls, which is chillingly described as a backward lullaby. Seriously creepy stuff. Then comes the visual evidence. Mariam standing out in the moonlight, her head tilted at this totally unnatural angle, her lips stained almost pitch black, and she's holding a small bowl filled with something thick and red. The author uses these highly specific, incredibly unsettling sensory details to just slowly pull back the curtain on Mariam's so-called perfection. Moving into Section 2, the Midnight Ritual, the Slippery Slope of Vanity. So, we learn that Mariam actually discovered an ancient ritual hidden away in her late grandmother's belongings. It's one that promised eternal youth, but, as you'd expect, it demanded a horrific payment. And look at how the author breaks this nightmare down into a sterile, almost clinical three-step routine. The ritual required blood, specifically from those bound to her by love. First, she walks into their room humming that twisted lullaby. Second, she uses a small blade to make a gentle cut. And third, she collects just a few drops of blood while they're fast asleep. The really crucial point here is how the narrative presents this profound, unspeakable evil as just a quiet, careful nighttime routine. She is literally stealing the life force of her own kids, but executing it with the gentle precision of a mother tucking them into bed. It's so deeply unsettling. Now, follow this timeline to see how the pacing of Mariam's downfall just rapidly accelerates. It begins with hesitation, but eventually she gives in. Night 1, it's just a single drop. And the immediate reward is intoxicating. Her wrinkles fade away, her skin suddenly glows. But look at the progression. Weeks later, the text bluntly tells us the hunger grows, and so does her greed. She starts taking more and more. The whole cycle accelerates until we hit the final night, which is marked by a massive, chilling environmental shift. The humming stops, and the entire village just falls completely silent. The structure here is showing us that vanity acts exactly like an addiction. What starts as just a single drop to maintain a youthful glow inevitably spirals completely out of control. Section 3. The Cost of Vanity. The Corruption of Love. Now, this is where the physical horror completely gives way to pure psychological terror. The pacing of the story drastically slows down to focus on a single, devastating interaction. One night, that careful, sterile routine gets broken. Lila actually wakes up while her mother is harvesting her blood, and she asks this simple, incredibly heartbreaking question: "Mama, why does it hurt?" The text tells us that Mariam freezes. For a brief, fleeting second, the actual mother inside of her screams out against what she's doing. It is quite literally the last gasp of Mariam's humanity, but the story explicitly notes that the hunger was simply louder. Her eyes lose that human warmth, and her smile stretches just a little too wide. And then This is the response she actually gives her daughter. It's because you love me. This right here is the moment Miriam completely crosses the moral event horizon. She is weaponizing her child's pure, innocent love to justify her own monstrous greed. It completely inverts every biological and societal expectation we have of a parent sacrificing for their child. Instead, Miriam demands that her child sacrifice absolutely everything just for the mother's vanity, and she violently twists the very definition of love to make it happen. The aftermath of this interaction is incredibly stark. The very next morning, only Ayan is seen. Days turn into weeks, and Lila simply disappears. But look at Mariam's reaction. As the villagers finally start to ask questions, she's described as smiling, looking more beautiful than she ever has before. Her response to their growing concern? An arrogant, totally flippant, "You worry too much." Any shred of empathy is completely gone now, replaced entirely by this intoxicating, youthful beauty built on the ultimate, unthinkable betrayal. Section 4. The chilling twist, the macabre reversal. Remember earlier when I mentioned that the humming abruptly stopped? Well, after weeks of plunging the whole village into an eerie silence, the villagers finally decide to break down her door at dawn. And this is the scene that they discover. Mariam, the woman who had mercilessly sacrificed her own flesh and blood for the glow of youth, is found lying cold on the floor. Drained, pale, lifeless. The exact physical symptoms she had inflicted upon her own children have now been visited upon her in a devastatingly sudden conclusion. Which brings us right to the definition of what truly happened in that house: the inherited curse. Because the villagers don't just find Mariam's body. Standing right beside her, in the shadows, are Ayan and Lila. They're both smiling, and their lips are stained red. The victims have literally become the predators. The story reveals its ultimate terrifying truth here. Mariam didn't just drain her children's life force. She fundamentally corrupted their souls. By feeding on them, she passed on that monstrous hunger. Yes, they survived, but only by learning and adopting the exact same evil that was destroying them in the first place. And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, the dark takeaway, inheriting monsters. Ultimately, this piece of folklore serves as a really dark mirror for some very real, everyday psychological themes. If we break down the anatomy of this greed, it gives us 3 core truths derived from the text. First, the illusion of perfection absolutely always demands a hidden sacrifice. Mariam's flawless public persona was completely sustained by a secret, horrific cost behind closed doors. Second, we see exactly how easily greed can disguise itself as love, manipulating our most vulnerable human bonds to justify selfish extraction. And finally, the most terrifying point of all, toxic cycles are inherited. Mariam's actions didn't just end her own life, they transformed her innocent, loving children into exact replicas of the monster she had become. So I want to leave you with this final thought, basically expanding on that central question we started with. The story of Mariam is definitely an extreme, macabre piece of fictional folklore, but the core human failings it highlights, those are entirely universal. How far would you go to erase a single wrinkle? And perhaps more importantly, what sacrifices do we unknowingly demand from the people who love us the most, simply to maintain our own fragile illusions of perfection? Thank you so much for exploring this deeply dark narrative with me today on The Explainer. Keep analyzing, keep questioning everything, and I'll catch you next time.